It's certainly a privilege for me to be here with you this morning, and I do want to extend my appreciation to the congregation for the invitation. I've heard a lot about Timberville. Had a chance to actually see the building about a month ago, Warren, as the business I work in took me down here to the water treatment plant. And so I ended up calling Brother Warren, and we met here at the building, and I got to go through the building, and then we went over to the middle school and got to see the facility there, and certainly things, obviously a great deal of work has went into this effort, and certainly I hope that my part of it has been beneficial. I know that there was a lot of contacts, a lot of publicity, which is always good for the Lord's Church, to let the community and let those around know that we are really concerned about the souls of individuals and about the spiritual condition. And certainly in our world today, that is extremely needful, and I don't think we can do enough of that. And certainly I've had the opportunity to know, again, a lot about Timberville, because it seems like for the last couple of years, the elders in Belington, of which I serve as one, have had to approve Brother Mike Phillips coming over here to be on your summer series. And first couple of years, we thought, I don't know, no, we're just kidding. But Brother Mike enjoys the opportunity to come over and speak, and when we send that man on vacation, make him take a vacation, he goes somewhere else and preaches. It never fails. So we're thankful to have Brother Mike working with us in Belington. And so we certainly, again, hope that our time together today will be beneficial as we continue looking at some of the topics that I believe are so critical, and you know, a lot of people think, oh, that's all you can say about these topics. Well, as I mentioned yesterday to somebody, the first session I did yesterday, the Science of Creation, I did 14 slides out of 186. So I didn't even touch the hem of the garment of material that I have to present or could present, and there's no doubt in my mind that I haven't even begun to touch the hem of the garment of the marvels of the creation that God has done for us that we could use to prove that He is. And of course our effort here is to, number one, make sure that we believe that there is a God. And that's the lesson that we're going to present today. There is a God, and it's important that we understand, because there are a lot of people who do not understand. Well, why do you go to church on Sunday morning? Well, I can't say Sunday night here, but this is a new experience for me. Hopefully the congregation won't get any smaller between now and 1 o'clock. Sometimes you have trouble getting them back on Sunday. That solves that problem, doesn't it? Just keep them here. So I like that. But but people want to know, why do you waste, in their minds, so much time going to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, gospel meetings, Wednesday night? They just do not understand, because they don't even believe in God. And so as we look at this topic, of course there are only certain things we can know, and we'll look at that as we explore through these. The concept of scientific theology, the proof that there is a God, can't depend upon naturalistic observations. In other words, observations from the world. We can go into the world, we can sit out in the woods. I'm an avid hunter, like to get out into the woods, like to go hiking, and we can sit out there and we can see from nature around us that there must be something greater. Virtually every culture has, the American Indians, and most every culture has that to a degree. And yet, with just using science, we're not going to know very much about God. Science is tentative and provisional. Its theories are always on the change. It never stays the same. And if you think it does, just get a textbook from about the 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. A biology textbook or a science textbook, and compare it to a modern textbook, and you'll see that what they said was fact back then. Well, no, it's different. We got a new fact now. Well, science and the theology of God can't be built on something that is, as the theory says, and there's actually a theory in science, it's called the radical change theory of science, that from time to time, over generations, there are going to be radical shifts in what we know are the facts. Put the no's in quotations, because they will thump their science books and their lab tables. Yes, this is the fact, this is the fact. Oh, wait a minute, no, this isn't the fact. And they can just as quickly change, oh, it's different now. Oh, how can it be different? A fact is a fact is a fact. But science is ever changing, and we need to understand that. Which theory that is accepted today, that will ultimately be changed, we really don't know. Now, there are obviously some that have withstood longer periods of time. Okay, biogenesis, for example, that life only comes from other life. And so we know that there have been some theories that are beginning to sort of be rock solid, but many of them, the most popular theories today, I believe, will change when more evidence is gathered, if we can ever get to the bottom of the situation. And so the evidence for God can't be based on anything so unsure. If that's all we're basing our belief in God on, is just what we can see from nature, we're on a house of cards. Because remember yesterday I talked about the idea that the same evidence that I use to point to a God, the atheist can point to the naturalistic evolutionary model of things. And in his mind it's just as convincing, just as logical, and just as scientific. And so we have to be careful about how we build the case for the nature, for the existence of God. Number one, it can't be based on empirical science. Number two, it does require belief in something that we can't test in the scientific method. Okay? So it's more philosophical in nature than it is scientific. We have to understand it. We have to admit that. Don't ever tell somebody, I can prove that God exists. Because when they start, well then get your science, your test book, or your test tubes, and prove the existence of God. I can't get God to create something right here, spontaneously, right now, and I could convince a lot of people if I could say, hey God, it's time to do this, but God's not going to do that for me. Okay? And so we have to be careful, we have to understand that the case that we build is not necessarily built on science. It actually is based in reason and logic, and it's something that in legal terms, and I'm not a lawyer, I don't pretend, I don't play one on TV, okay? I don't pretend to know much about the law, but I do understand this basic idea of prima facie. And the basic idea there is that if we take bits and pieces of evidence and we keep stacking them on one side and say, okay, here's evidence for this and here's evidence that goes against this, and we keep stacking it up, and if the evidence overwhelms on one side, we have a lot of convicts, a lot of people who have been convicted of crimes that are sitting in jails and prisons today because of the evidence. The evidence was there. No one saw them commit the crime. They may not have left a fingerprint, but there was bits and pieces of things that could be put together. Their tire track, their shoe print. Maybe they dropped a hair, and with the DNA evidence, well, that really nails them nowadays because we've gotten pretty good with that. And so those are the prima facie pieces of evidence that we use. Well, we can look at several things. When we look at the fact that around the world there are religions in virtually every culture, even the most primitive of tribes, seem to have some religious concept. Now, it doesn't always match what we might consider religion. Okay, sitting in a church building, but there is some sort of religious idea. Where did the idea of religion come from? That's a huge question, all right? Because the human mind is great, and in one of our sessions today, I'm going to talk about the human brain some. And it's a tremendously designed organ, but there are certain things it can't do. And one of the things it can't do is come up with something that is totally new or novel. And I'll put this challenge to anyone, any scientist, anyone, anywhere, come up with anything that, sit down and draw a space monster or something, that is totally new, that has no connection to anything you know about. And you can't do it. If you're drawing space monsters, well, this alien's going to invade the Earth next week. And you draw somebody, it might have a head, it might have 6 heads, it might have feet, and it might have 20 feet. But it's always going to be built on something that we understand. We're going to simply take the ideas and things we know about, and we're going to adapt it into some new variation. But we can't come up with anything original. What about the idea of morality? The fact that in the animal kingdom, this idea of moral right and wrong is, boy, the behaviorists have to really stretch monkey behavior or dog behavior or a cow taking care of its calf. They really have to stretch that to get to the point of the understanding that humans have of morality. Although, unfortunately, we're losing that in the world today. We're losing the sense of right and wrong. I think we're genetically breeding it out of our young people, our populations. That's why we see much of what's happening in the world around us today. We need to get morality back into our lives, not only as Christians, but for the population in general. Certainly it's a tremendously important thing, but animals do not show that. So morality. The law of causality. This is a real basic principle in science that says for every effect, there is a cause. All right, so for the computer that's running this PowerPoint, that's the effect. There's a marvelous piece of machine. I plug a little, called a thumb drive. I have no idea what's in there. I don't know. All I know is my show better be on it, okay, because I'm speechless. So, I'll tie my hands and I can't talk, okay? But, and I don't understand how that works. That is an effect. What was the cause? Well, there is somebody, somewhere, who is more intelligent than that piece of equipment. Who designed it? Who built it? They are the cause of that effect. So then when we look at something like the human body, with all of its marvelous systems and backup systems and so many things, then we have to say that's the effect. What's the cause? When we look at the universe, with everything that we're discovering, the pictures from the Hubble telescope and on, what's the cause for all of that? You have to have a cause that is greater than the effect. That's the law of causality. It is absolute in science. For every effect there has to be a cause. And so the prima facie evidence says that God is greater than the creation. And that certainly helps us to understand that there must be a God. Again, it's an indirect piece of evidence. It is, that's just a conclusion we can draw from the basis of what we know about effects and causes. The anthropomorphic principle is the just so principle. The idea that it appears the universe is created for us. The universe appears, the earth appears to be created for us, for our existence. And even the evolutionists accept this idea that somehow, that all of these things, the atmospheric pressure, and of course they say, well, we just evolved into that environment. But, over and over again, we see this concept that the earth, the environment, the planet, our solar system from our sun's just exactly the right distance away. Any closer, we'd burn up. Any further away, we'd freeze. And even the rotation of the earth on its axis, 24 hours, has to be just so. Okay, the just so principle. And so when we add all of those things up, we build a case that's prima facie that helps us to understand that there is a God. Well, then we have, as Christians, we have the inspiration of God's Word. We have the Bible. And I don't know about you, and if you've never studied the history of the Bible, I'm not just talking about the writers of the Bible, but I'm talking about the manuscripts that have come to lead to what we have today. I had the opportunity when I was in England in 2006 to go to the British Museum of Natural History. I went into the Antiquities Division, and it was a big dark room. There wasn't a lot of people. I guess not too many people like old books. But I do. And so I went in, and in a cabinet, glass-lined, controlled cabinet, was a page. It was a page of, I found my pointer, it was a page of this, the Codex Sinaiticus. It was of the book of Isaiah, just one page of the oldest copy of the book of Isaiah in existence today, from the Dead Sea Scrolls. It was a part of the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I tell you, chills go up and down my back when I see a copy of God's Word that is thousands, 2,000–3,000 years old. And there are just tons, and the Dead Sea Scrolls did nothing but confirm exactly what we already had revealed in God's Word. No new information was provided. Tremendous. And so we have God revealing Himself to us. Okay, what do the evolutionists, the atheists have? They got nothing, folks. They got, well, we just like this. We just think so. And so they certainly, we have historicity, and like I said, by and of itself, that is a very big arguing point for the existence of God. Well, no, someone just sat down and wrote that. Let them prove that fact. Let them start, challenge someone and say, well, we know that people just wrote that. Let them sit down and prove that historically that doesn't happen. You can't when you start digging back into all of the things that we have to support the Bible. Well, as the scripture reading said, the just shall live by faith, for I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it's the power of God unto salvation, not to everyone that believeth, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. The just shall live by faith. Remember, God said we're going to have faith. This isn't going to be, I'm going to prove to you beyond a shadow of a doubt I'm here, people. Get ready. No, that's not what it's going to take. That's not what's going to happen. We're going to have not a leap of faith into a dark chasm because there's no evidence out there, but we're going to have evidence that we can stack up and say, yes, I feel good about what I believe about the existence of God. And of course we know that God is going to be very wrathful to those who say, nah, this book, it's just, it's just nice poetry, it's just nice literature, and so on. Verse 19 and 20, because that which may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has showed it unto them. For the invisible things of the creation of the world clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made. We want to look at, for just a few minutes, you ought to know I can't go very long talking about science, okay? So I'm going to some science, folks. The invisible things that God has created, that most of us never get the opportunity to see, to think about. And so as we look at for a few minutes, and because I don't want you to be, I don't want to be, and that's why I'm willing to come, wherever for, if it's out of my own pocket, I'll be happy to go wherever and speak to people who are interested on these things. Even if it's just 4 or 5 people. When I was in Oxford the second time, I made arrangements on Wednesday because I was there Sunday evening through Thursday evening. I made arrangements with the Congregation of the Lord's Church at Oxford, England, a city of about 800,000 people. You know how many people came to services on Wednesday night? 7. And 2 of those were visitors from Bristol, England, where I was headed the next weekend, to friends of mine where the preacher there at Bristol, England. 7 people out of 800,000. Not a very big number of individuals. And certainly some intelligent people in that city, but they have rejected God, and so as Paul wrote, they are going to be without excuse. And so as we look at some invisible things, some of the things that are out there, but we don't understand. There are subatomic particles that we'll never see. I'll never see them. I can see some evidence sometimes. Protons, neutrons, electrons, quarks, muons. Had the chance to go visit a former student while I was in, that was the 2006 trip. One of my students from Barber County, Philippi, West Virginia, nowheresville, okay, had become a particle physicist, a top-level scientist in the world. I went to the facility he worked at, a particle accelerator, one of these things that speeds up electrons to near the speed of light, and they crash them into stuff. And by doing that, they produce something called muons. And he took me and showed me this stuff and tried to explain. In about 2 seconds, I was lost. It didn't take me any. Now I know how my 10th graders felt when I started rattling off some of the stuff But here was this young man. He was only like 23 or something. Brilliant individual, but he was studying these subatomic particles called muons that make up the universe. They're here. How many of you have ever seen? This table is made of electrons and protons and neutrons, and they're in motion. And yet, feels solid to me. And yet they're in motion. There's things, invisible things that we simply cannot understand. This is a block of gel that I was fortunate enough to receive because of something I did. I don't remember what it was, but they had put this block of gel into a proton accelerator, one of these linear accelerators, and they got the speed of this thing up to whatever speed it was. It's just under the speed of light, and then they crashed it into this block of, it's about a 2x2 block of plastic, and this tree-like pattern that you see is the proton shattering as it blasted into that piece of plastic. And so that is evidence of what? Something that's invisible. That is physical evidence of that a particle is there, that I'll never see, you'll never see, but the invisible things that God created are indeed there. Well, we can talk about the fine-tuning of the physical constants of the universe to say that these are invisible things that we'll never see. Now, these numbers are the maximum deviation. That means these numbers over here, 1 to the 37th power, 1 to the 40th power, and so on, that's how much it can only be off. If it's off any more than that, and those are big numbers, we wouldn't be here. The universe wouldn't exist. All right? These are invisible things, the cosmological constant, the mass of the universe. And one of the problems they have today is they lost about 90% of the universe. They don't know where it's at. They term it dark matter because we don't know what it is. And they're really struggling with trying to get a handle on, where the rest of the universe is that's being hidden. It's really interesting discussion sometimes. But the fine-tuning of the universe. George Greenstein, an astronomer, said this: as we survey all the evidence, the thought incessantly arises that some supernatural agency, or rather agency, in the capital A, must be involved. Is it possible that suddenly, without intending to, we have stumbled upon scientific proof of the existence of a supreme being? Was it God who stepped in and so providentially crafted the cosmos for our benefit? This is not a creationist. This is not a theist. This is an atheist who says, he's an astronomer, he says, you look at all this stuff, I can't explain it otherwise. Maybe we just proved God, folks. Okay? And that's a pretty big assertion for somebody that's lived his life and still living his life, as far as I would know, as an atheist. Well, the invisible things, little things that crawl around in the ground all the time. We have out here in the yard, I'm sure if I had spent some time, we could locate a slime mold, which live most of their life here as an amoeboid cell. That means they go crawling around in the dirt and the mud and stuff, and they're perfectly happy as individual cells until it's time for them to reproduce. Then God has created within those single amoeboid cells something that says, find somebody else. Find another of my species. Find 1,000 of my species. And we're going to get together and we're going to form a slug-like aggregate. They're literally about a quarter of an inch long. It's visible. But the individual cells, it takes about 10,000 of them to reach that level. And then they go crawling around and produce the reproductive structure. This becomes this and produces new spores that become the amoeboid cells, which are the adult slime mold. Just an insanely incredible process, and you know, it's just wild how this all fits together. Those are invisible things. I don't expect any of you will ever see a slime mold. Okay, sorry. You know, I could set you up with some experiments, with some lab stuff where you can actually grow these things in a culture dish, and you have this petri dish full of food, and you have the aggregate or the amoeboid cells are in there, but you can't see them until he does what? Until they all decide we're going to get together and we're going to reproduce. And then you see the little slug, and it'll crawl around and then finally produce the spores. I have had the fortunate opportunity to do that while I was in my undergraduate work. Well, then we can look at the invisible things like a bacteria. And of course we know that bacteria are everywhere. We're covered with bacteria. And in our mouth, I'm sorry, I hate to gross anybody, but that's what I like to do. Right now in our mouths are hundreds of millions of bacteria. Most of these Most of these bacteria are flagellated. That means they have little flagella. And you know what they do with those little flagella? They whip them around and they go swimming along. While I was at the MCV in Richmond as a biomedical photographer, we had a microscope that was nice. Okay, 77. It was $150,000 then, and I'm sure today it's well over $1 million to buy that microscope. But I was able, when we didn't have other work to do, I wasn't in the OR or in the morgue or something taking pictures, I was able to sit down and look at stuff. One of the most interesting things I've ever done is take a toothpick, scrape the edge, get the inside of my mouth, a little bit of spit, put it on a slide, and stick it in the microscope, put it under dark field microscopy, and all of a sudden you think, yuck. Swimming out of my mouth are just millions of bacteria. It's incredibly gross, but I loved it, okay? Tremendous, tremendous opportunity, but it's this little part right here, the rotary motor that run the flagella of the bacteria. It can go from -200 RPM to 1,000 RPM, that's going backwards and then going this way. It can do that in like 1/100 of a second. It can go from spinning 1,000 miles or 1,000 RPMs and reverse instantly. More than 500 different parts, proteins have to go into building the entire flagella and the motor. You know, that's invisible. We're never going to see those things. But they're there. And when we study them, what's the cause of that? This, remember, according to evolution, that bacteria is the first living thing that came into existence. Well, that wasn't a simple cell, folks. It was an incredibly complex, thousands of DNA molecules, and on and on and on we go. Well, we can also look at something like symbiosis, a relationship between two organisms where they're living in close association with one another. And symbiosis occurs in a lot of different types. You have commensalism, mutualism, predation, so on, and I don't have time to cover all those. We'd be here till midnight if I started. But if we take just one example of the ant and the acacia tree, Now, most of these are in Africa, although I have black locust trees in my, along the woods where I live back in Belington, that if you pull down the limb of one of those black locust trees, you will see ants. And they stay on those limbs because they get nutrients. They get sap out of the tree secretes nutrients, sugar-like material that the ants will feed on. Well, in the case of the acacias in Africa, not only do they produce food for the ants, because the ants actually turn around and give them protection. If you go up to one of those acacia trees and you start picking off leaves, ants are going to start swarming from that tree out to that limb. They'll actually swarm down the trunk, and they will attack the legs and feet and crawl up the lower body of the whatever is eating their tree, okay, to drive it off. And so, what kind of process lets a tree and an ant know that, oh, well, we can help each other here? That's pretty good to think, oh, this just happened. Or what about the alligator and the little bird that an alligator, 10, 12 feet, will open its mouth, and this little bird flies in. Well, you're thinking, okay, that alligator just got a free snack. No, the alligator just holds his mouth open because that little bird's in there picking out bits and pieces of the alligator's last meal, eating the little bits and pieces of flesh and you know what happened to your gums and teeth if you get a little bit of beef stuck down, roast beef or something stuck down in between them. If you don't get it flossed good, next morning you got this sore gum, don't you? It's irritated because of the bacterial growth there. That's exactly what the alligator and the bird do. Now, can you imagine that scene where this 10-foot alligator and this bird said, okay, here's the deal, buddy. I'm going to open my mouth and you're going to fly in, you're going to get food, and I'm not going to eat you. Give me a break, okay? That takes a real bird brain maybe to believe that, I'm not sure. But the invisible things, well, now, how's that for an invisible thing? Okay, hopefully you can see what's up there. Obviously, there's a wood frog. All right, and you can see his outline here is his foot, his right foot, his eyes, head, left foot, back legs, and so on. But against a tree, those frogs blend in so marvelously. The texture coloration that God has designed with, it's hard to imagine. Well, then we have the not so invisible things. We have frogs like this, the poison dart frog, poison arrow frog of South America, one of the many. And he is not invisible by any stretch of the imagination, because God has designed him with poison so toxic that if I touched it, in a matter of hours, I would be dead. Right? So much so that the Indians of that part of the world just rub the tips of their arrows on the backs. Just all you have to do is just rub it up and down a couple times, and they shoot monkeys or whatever, and instant paralyzation and death occurs. So, we have invisible things, and then, of course, not so invisible things. Well, as we wrap this up, we talked about DNA a little bit yesterday, but there is something in DNA that has just been discovered in about the past 4 years, 3 years, somewhere in there. It's called the KDM5A gene. Folks, we have built into this chemical genetic code in our cells an alarm clock. This alarm clock somehow controls and knows when certain things are supposed to happen in our bodies. Who put that alarm clock in there, folks? That's invisible, and yet we all have one of them. We all have that built-in gene that somehow has the ability to know how much time has passed. I talked about the cicada yesterday that goes down on the ground as a larva and stays there for 17 years. This is part of the answer. This that thing up there, KDM5A. Okay, that alarm clock gene is how this part of how the cicada do it. And so there are things, and folks, I am absolutely guaranteeing you, and I don't say this, and I'll say this to the best part, or to the best geneticist in the world, that we've only scratched, and they'll probably agree with me, I know they will, we've only scratched the surface of our understanding of the DNA, of what it does and how it does it, and the marvelous control systems that are in there. If we were to know everything that goes on inside the nucleus of our cells, I'm not sure. Somebody came in and said, Dave, your talk yesterday just filled my brain up with so much I can't remember it all. Okay, it'd be months before I'm back to normal. If we knew what is going on inside the cell, I'm absolutely convinced our minds would be blown. I mean, we may just shut down because this is just sensory overload. And of course, One of the Old Testament writers said the secret things belong to God. So I'm not convinced we're ever going to know everything. All right? I'm not sure in our lifetime we'd ever have the ability. If humans were to go on existing for another 1,000,000 years, of course we know we're not promised. We got about, we might have 10 more seconds. May not even have that, right, Warren? We're not promised how much time we have, but I'm convinced that it certainly would, not be enough time. So how does the world view the scientific evidence, these invisible things that we talked about? Because they, when they knew not God, glorified Him not as God, but when neither were thankful, and became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. Now, I don't know about you, okay? As a scientist, I never like to be caught in front of my students not knowing what I wanted to talk about, not knowing that I had the best information I could provide to the students. The same thing continues whether I'm preaching a gospel sermon for the congregation of Belington or whether I'm doing one of these. I want to have the best understanding of this material I can. But, to imagine God calling them fools when they say, we are the smartest people there are. We know the answers. And God says, if you reject me, you have become, you're professing yourself, you're proving yourself to be a fool, even though you think you're wise. And so certainly it's an important point that we need to understand, that many, probably the majority of people in the world are going to reject the truth of God. They're going to reject the prima facie evidence. They can look at all that and you can explain all that and you can go through the history of the Bible and they understand, yeah, we know the manuscripts and all this stuff, and they can turn it, but we don't care. They're going to ignore it. Or they can have the best education in the world, whether it's particle physics or astronomy or biology or genetics or whatever. And then they can turn around and say, yeah, it may point to a creator, but I don't care. So what? Big deal. I'll reject the righteousness of God. And of course, God's going to call them fools. So the question is, are you and I without excuse? Are we in a situation where we will reject the truth of God's existence? Whether we will reject the truth of God's Word for the plan of salvation? It's not enough. I wish it was. But it's not enough to believe that God is, that there is a God. It's not enough to believe that the Bible is God's Word. Or have read it through from front to back and back to front and middle inwards and out. That's not enough. It's not enough to be a creationist. It's not enough to be a young earth creationist. If that's all we do, then when we stand before God in judgment, we're going to be condemned. We're going to hear the words, "Depart from me, thou unfaithful servant." We're going to hear those words. So just knowing and believing and hearing, the devils believe and tremble. They know that there's a God, but they've already, the devils have already rejected Him. They've already decided to do their own thing. Well, you see what that's got them. The place is prepared for the devil and his angels. So we need to hear Romans 10:17. We need to believe that Jesus is, Mark 16:16. He that believeth and is baptized shall be saved. We need to repent of the sins that we have committed. It might be us rejecting the existence of God. It might be us saying, yeah, I believe God exists, but I never really did anything about it. I never believed that I needed to be obedient and faithful and do His will. We need to confess that Jesus is the Son of God. Matthew 10 verses 32 and 33, and then of course we need to be baptized in the watery grave of baptism so that we can, just like the 10 examples in the book of Acts, we can meet the blood that was shed on the cross for on our behalf, so that we can have our sins washed away. We can start a new life. We can become the person then who says, I know that there is a God. I believe that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. And I know my life isn't going to continue forever, and I am going to have to give an account for how I have lived. And I need to be right with Him when I stand in judgment. So instead of hearing, "Depart from me, thou unfaithful servant," we can hear, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Enter into the joys of thy rest." And so then, of course, we need to live faithfully from that point on to do those things that God wants us to do, to be a servant of His, to be an example for Him, to be able to defend our faith of God's existence. Folks, you can worship here on Sunday morning, and Sunday morning, and Sunday afternoon, or in Billington, Sunday night and Wednesday night, come to every gospel meeting, and every time there's anything going on, you're there. You can do that, but if we're not standing up in our daily lives for the Lord, then we're going to hear, I believe in the Sermon on the Mount, when Jesus is teaching, many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord. Those are Christians, folks. Those are New Testament Christians. I'm convinced those aren't the people down here at the church down the road. That's us. There's going to be many Christians who think they're right, who are going to find out that they are going to hear, depart from me. Terrible, terrible words to imagine. But if we don't live our everyday, every hour, every minute lives like God is, and then be able to defend that to the best of our ability. And if you can't maybe answer all this science stuff, call me. Talk to Warren. Get the information from the apology experts. There's plenty of places to go to get the information that can help you to defend your faith in God to others. Well, the question then comes to us today. Whoops. Are you without excuse? All right? That's the question that has to be answered at this point. Have you made excuses for your salvation to God? If you have, now's the time to make that right. The greatest thing that you could do would be in a few minutes to assemble around the Lord's table with the faithful brothers and sisters in Christ and to realize that He died for you. He died for all of us. And that if you've not put Him on in baptism, you need to do that. You have that opportunity now. If you've done that and maybe you've let the scientific teachings of the world, maybe you've let the challenges that Satan is going to, folks, when you become a New Testament Christian, you've got the biggest bullseye on your back and front and sides that you're ever going to imagine. Satan doesn't have to worry about the hundreds of thousands of people in the world. He's already got them. He's got us to target on. So he's got a relatively small group of people he has to work on, because he doesn't need the one he's already got. They're already His servant. They're already serving Him. They're already putting Him first and themselves. And putting themselves first puts Him first. And so today, if you've allowed that, you've fallen away, the Lord also had a plan for how you can be made whole. You can be restored back to Him. Whatever your need might be today, if you need to put on Christ in baptism or to be restored, we'd encourage you to let that be known as we stand and sing the song.